It's true that some things change as we get older. But if you're a woman over 40 and you're dealing with insomnia, brain fog, moodiness, and weight gain, you don't have to accept it as just another part of aging. And with MIDI Health, you can get help and stop pushing through it alone. The experts at MIDI understand that all these symptoms can be connected to the hormonal changes that happen around menopause, and MIDI can help you feel more like yourself again. Many healthcare providers aren't trained to treat or even recognize menopause symptoms. MIDI clinicians are menopause experts. They're dedicated to providing safe, effective, FDA-approved solutions for dozens of hormonal symptoms, not just hot flashes. Most importantly, they're covered by insurance. 91% of MIDI patients get relief from symptoms within just 2 months. You deserve to feel great. Book your virtual visit today at joinmidi.com. That's joinmidi.com.
If you love chilling mysteries, unsolved cases, and a touch of mom-style humor, Moms and Mysteries is the podcast you've been searching for. Hey guys, I'm Mandy.
And I'm Melissa. Join us every Tuesday for Moms and Mysteries, your gateway to gripping, well-researched true crime stories. Each week, we deep dive into a variety of mind-boggling cases as we shed light on everything from heists to whodunits. We're your go-to podcast for mysteries with a motherly touch. Subscribe now to Moms and Mysteries wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey guys, and welcome to the Moms and Mysteries podcast, a true crime podcast featuring myself, Mandy, and my dear friend, Melissa. Hi, Melissa.
Hi, Mandy. How are you?
I am doing well. I felt like I was going to say more there, but there's just
No,
nothing
and your
more to say.
face was so just like looking up at the clouds, even though you're inside. It was a really beautiful moment. I'm sorry everyone didn't get to see that.
I am facing the window, actually.
Okay.
I've moved my whole setup. All my recording equipment is now facing the window. So I am looking out the window, listening to the birds chirping and the sun shining. And it looks like a beautiful day outside.
Perfect. Yeah, no, it is a really pretty day. I know we get into the weather a lot, but come on, give it to us. How long will
It's
this
one
last?
of the only
Who
things we
knows?
have, truly.
It might be the only thing we have here. But Mandy, I know you are so pumped about this episode, and I'm pumped because I know you're pumped. So this will be a great, wild story that I wasn't really aware of, but you know maybe too much about.
Possibly, maybe. Yes, I have definitely heard this story before, and I was really excited when I saw that Haley wanted to research it for real and not just like Reddit research this
Sure.
case, because
Is that-
it is a real story. So I'm really excited. But if you have listened to the show for a while, you know, if there's one thing I love, it's a good conspiracy theory. I don't necessarily mean that I love to subscribe to the beliefs of all of them. I don't think I would call myself a conspiracy theorist. Melissa, I think you can speak for me here, right? You can help me out here and say that I'm not a conspiracy theorist.
I'm sorry, birds aren't real. No, I agree, you're not, but you are very entertained by the
Yes.
idea of them, and I get that.
I am very entertained by conspiracy theories, but yeah, I love hearing about them, and just I love going down rabbit holes. Some things really are too weird to be true. This story to me is just one of those cases you're just like, wow, this is really crazy. So this week we're telling the story of Mary Pinchot Meyer, and this is a woman who really seemed to have it all. She was intelligent, beautiful, and she had connections to the most powerful circles in Washington, D.C. Her life was intertwined with figures like John F. Kennedy, who has kind of a significant role in this story. And she was also married to a man who was in the CIA. But on the morning of October 12th, 1964, Mary's story took a tragic and mysterious turn. While she was walking along the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal towpath, Mary was shot execution style in broad daylight. There was no clear motive for her murder, but of course her connections to numerous people of status, including politicians, celebrities, and socialites, led to numerous conspiracy theories that suggested her death was not random. The case remains unsolved to this day, and there are many questions lingering about the life and untimely death of Mary Pinchot Meyer.
Mary was born into a life of privilege, and her upbringing was really anything but ordinary. She came into the world on October 14th, 1920, and was raised among America's elite in a family known for its power, wealth, and activism. Mary's father, Amos, was a lawyer and the co-founder of the American Civil Liberties Union, or ACLU, and her mother, Ruth, was a journalist who wrote for magazines such as The Nation and The New Republic. Mary and her two sisters were raised at Gray Towers, which was the family's estate in Milford, Pennsylvania, and they also spent a lot of time in a luxurious New York City apartment on Park Avenue. She was surrounded by people of influence and would go on to carve out a path of her own. Mary's younger sister, Antoinette, who also went by Tony, went on to be a prominent figure in the D.C. society and eventually married the editor of the Washington Post, Ben Bradley. Tony and Ben were in the same influential circles that Mary was. Mary also had a half-sister from her father's first marriage named Rose, who became a socialite and actress who was best known for her beauty and talent. And Mary's uncle Gifford was known as the father of American conservation. He actually played a key role in shaping the country's approach to natural resource management and conservation in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Gifford Pinchot was appointed the first head of the U.S. Forest Service in 1905 by President Roosevelt. He promoted the idea that natural resources were good for society, but only if they were used sustainably so they could be replenished. At the time, many people believed that natural resources were limitless, and Gifford was one of the first to say that this was stupidly false. Under his term, the amount of federally protected land in the U.S. nearly tripled, and when he left, there were 150 national forests totaling 172 million acres. Unfortunately, he was fired from his position by President Taft, but Gifford Pinchot went on to serve 2 terms as the governor of Pennsylvania.
So, as you can see, Mary was exposed to all kinds of things that most of us will never know about or understand. She grew up in a world of privilege and intellect, and she spent her childhood doing things like riding horses and attending cotillion dances, not to mention engaging with some of the most influential minds of her time. In Mary's biography, she was described as being basically an American princess. Mary was educated in the finest of schools, and eventually she attended the prestigious Vassar College. She wasn't just another socialite, though. Mary was a woman who was drawn to new ideas, politics, and art. When she was a senior in high school, her sister Rose died by suicide. And this loss devastated their father, who spiraled into a depression and began abusing alcohol before his own death in 1944. But despite these losses, Mary remained drawn to the vibrancy of those in power. All throughout her life, she challenged the status quo, and she really dove right in on hot issues like communism, anti-war movements, and progressive causes. At some point, she joined the American Labor Party, which was rumored to be run by communists at this time, and her involvement in the American Labor Party caught the attention of the FBI. And they began monitoring and documenting Mary's political activity. In 1938, Mary began dating a man named William Atwood, who would later become the U.S. ambassador to Guinea and an advisor to the U.S. representative to the United Nations. While she was attending a dance with Atwood, this was the first time that she actually came into contact with JFK, who was years away from actually becoming the president. But this was kind of the foreshadowing of their relationship. After graduating from Vassar in 1942, Mary set her sights on New York City, where she quickly made a name for herself as a journalist at United Press International. Many of her peers were confined to desk jobs, but Mary's natural charisma made her really great for journalism, and she thrived conducting interviews and reporting on her stories firsthand. Those who worked with her said that she had this boldness about her that just really set her apart. She was somebody who exuded warmth, but yet there was a very mysterious and distant aspect to her as well. During this time, Mary also started taking her own art a lot more seriously. She was taking classes at the Art Students League of New York and making connections with the abstract expressionists working in the city. Art just became another avenue for Mary to really push boundaries. In 1944, Mary met Cord Meyer, a decorated Marine lieutenant who had sustained severe injuries in combat, including the loss of one of his eyes. Cord was committed to preventing future wars, and he wanted to ensure this through the formation of a unified world government. Mary actually shared in Cord's passion for global peace, and so the two of them quickly fell in love. They ended up getting married on April 19th, 1945, and together they worked tirelessly to promote their ideals.
Cord eventually became the president of the United World Federalist, which advocated for a single global government to maintain world peace. Meanwhile, Mary supported him in these efforts while continuing her own work as a journalist and editor. Their movement gained traction and drew the support of high-profile individuals, including Albert Einstein, who personally raised funds for this cause. Do you ever hear names like Albert Einstein and then also know JFK is in this timeline?
No.
And also know like your parents and grandparents could have been alive during this time and think like, what?
Yes.
Who is our Albert Einstein?
Yeah, when Albert Einstein popped up in this story, I was like, huh? Hang on. I was
I
like,
know.
the real Albert Einstein?
It tells you how little
Right.
I know. And reading things like that and being surprised, I'm like, oh yeah, I am an idiot. I forgot.
Right.
So Cord and Mary's lives became even more and more about political activism. In 1945, the couple started their family. They had their first son, Quentin, followed by their second son, Michael, in 1947. Soon after, they relocated to Cambridge, Massachusetts, where Mary continued to develop her artistic talents at the Cambridge School of Design. By 1950, Mary and Cord had settled into what seemed like the ideal life. Their third son, Mark, was born that year, completing their family. But soon, things took a dramatic turn. Cord was approached by Allen Dulles, who at the time was the deputy director for plans of the CIA. Allen offered Cord a position with the agency and assured him that the work he was doing would align with his talents and past experience, but he couldn't give any specific details of the job for security reasons.
Melissa, would you take a job if someone was like, I promise that your skills will be useful, but I can't tell you what you'll be doing?
No, I love the show Severance. It's on Apple, and that's kind of what it feels like, where I'm like, how much money could I take for something like this? And the answer is, I almost said none. The answer is everything.
Or a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, I'm not the Einstein here. Despite his strong background in world federalism and advocacy for world peace, Cord accepted the position with the CIA, and he and Mary relocated with their children to McLean, Virginia, where they became even more embedded in Washington's web of power and secrecy. Cord's work with the CIA soon made him part of something that actually contradicted the world government ideals he once fought for. He became a key figure in Operation Mockingbird, which was a covert CIA program designed to manipulate the media. Cord worked under Frank Wisner to shape public perception, sway opinions, and even control major newspapers. The program was an elaborate effort to extend the CIA's influence over journalists and news outlets to ensure that stories lined up with U.S. intelligence objectives. One author described it as a grand instrument that was capable of rigging elections and molding public thought. In August of 1953, Joseph McCarthy accused Cord of being a communist, and the FBI refused to give him security clearance. At this point, Mary was also under suspicion, and the FBI had already been looking into her activities as well. They told Cord that she was allegedly a registered member of the American Labor Party of New York in 1944, which was at the time reportedly under left-wing communist domination. Cord was eventually cleared of these allegations and allowed to keep his job. And we have so much more to get into that aren't about people's jobs, abilities, and Albert Einstein after a quick break to hear word from this week's sponsors. As an introvert, there's nothing I love more than being at home. It's where I can truly unwind, feel comfortable, and enjoy just a little peace. But every now and then, it's nice to give the place a little refresh. Whether that means decluttering or just adding a few new pieces to feel more at ease, it's always a great time for a little home TLC. And if you're anything like me, Wayfair has everything you need to make your space exactly how you want it. Recently, I picked up a few things from Wayfair to make my home even more of an introvert's dream house. I was in the market for some kitchen utensils. I don't know about you, Mandy, but literally all my forks, knives, spoons are disappearing at a rapid pace, and no one seems to know where they are. I was also looking for a clever way to hide that not-so-charming cat litter box, and I found exactly what I was looking for. The utensils are perfect for both function and style, And that litter box hider, a total win. It blends right in and makes the whole room really look so much better. And as always, Wayfair really came through with the fast delivery, and it was also so easy to set up. There was no hassle, just the way I like it. My home feels even more cozy now, and it's like a mini escape every time I walk in.
Wayfair has so many options that make it easy to find everything you need to make your home just right. Whether you're updating your living room with a cozy chair, adding some storage solutions, or giving your kitchen a little upgrade, Wayfair has something for every style and budget. They even have free delivery, which is always a win in my book. Give your home the refresh it needs with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair. Every style, every home. It's 2025. Are you still wearing clothes from 2005? Let's face it, it's time for a change. This podcast is sponsored by Daily Look, the #1 highest-rated premium personal styling service for women. With Daily Look, you get your own dedicated personal stylist who curates a box of clothes based on your body shape, preferences, and lifestyle. No algorithms here, just real stylists working for you.
Look, according to my screen time, I'm a very, very busy person. Between family, work, and whatever that last thing is that my daughter needs for school the very next day, the last thing I want to do is go to a store and sift through endless racks of clothes to find something I might like. I'd honestly rather do anything else. But then I found Daily Look, and it really solved all my wardrobe problems. My stylist absolutely nailed it. And I'm not sure if there's such thing as a jeans fairy, but if there is, it's my stylist Esperanza. She found jeans that are actually in style, but they also look cute and are comfortable and somehow long enough for me. Daily Look sent me a box filled with pieces curated just for me, and I got to try them all on in the comfort of my home. And I honestly loved everything I tried on.
You can try on up to 12 premium pieces per box in the comfort of your home, whether you need something chic for a day at the office or just cozy outfits for your everyday routine. Daily Look has you covered. And the best part is, you only pay for what you actually love, and Daily Look offers free shipping both ways. The process is simple. Fill out their style quiz, receive up to 12 hand-selected items delivered to your door, and keep what you love. It's truly that simple. Daily Look partners with both established and up-and-coming designers, so you might find pieces from brands like Kate Spade, AG, Good American, Girlfriend Collective, Spiritual Gangster, and more. With sizes ranging from extra small to 3X and 0 to 24, there is truly something here for everyone.
It's time to get your own personal stylist with Daily Look. Head to dailylook.com to take your style quiz and use code MOM50 for 50% off your first order. Once again, that's dailylook.com for 50% off, and make sure you use our promo code MOM50 so they know we sent you. One last time, dailylook.com and promo code MOM50. And now back to the episode.
Before the break, we just started to really crack into the story of Mary Pinchot Meyer, who was a woman that had connections with some of the most influential people in the United States government at the time. She and her husband Cord just moved to Georgetown. This is now the early 1950s, after her husband Cord had joined the CIA, and the couple became very prominent figures in society there. They mingled with many others who were connected to the CIA and to U.S. foreign policy during the Cold War era. But the couple's marriage itself began to change because Mary was starting to become more disillusioned with her husband's work. As we said before, he took this job with the CIA and pretty much abandoned these ideals that the two of them had really grown in love together with. Now, the work he was doing for the CIA was really directly in contradiction to everything that she thought they were building together. She was really critical of U.S. militarism and CIA operations, so her husband's involvement with these things really weighed heavily on her. In the summer of 1954, the Meyers got some very famous new neighbors, John F. Kennedy and his wife, Jackie. But at this point, of course, it would still be years before JFK would become president. Mary and Jackie became friends, and they would take walks together along the towpath that ran parallel to the old Chesapeake and Ohio Barge Canal. And the Kennedys lived in the neighborhood for nearly 7 years until they ended up moving into the White House in 1961. In December of 1956, tragedy struck the Meyers when their 9-year-old son, Michael, was hit by a car on the curve of highway near their home. Mary heard her oldest son scream and the sound of screeching tires before she realized what happened. An ambulance arrived, but sadly it was too late. Mary reportedly offered comfort to the driver of the vehicle that hit her child, as they were completely hysterical about what had just happened. At first, the loss of their son brought Cord and Mary closer together, but the grief ended up being too much for their struggling marriage to handle. A year after Michael's death, Cord agreed to move out of the home and to start the separation that was required for a divorce. He moved into an apartment in Georgetown, and in 1958, Mary filed for divorce, citing extreme cruelty, mental in nature, which seriously injured her health, destroyed her happiness, rendered further cohabitation unendurable, and compelled the parties to separate. Mary continued to struggle emotionally in the wake of her son's death, and she started a period of deep introspection and personal transformation while she began searching for meaning in life again. She focused on her art and began exploring new relationships and new ideas. She and her 2 surviving sons moved to Georgetown and set up a studio in a garage that was converted for that purpose at her sister Tony's house. She got involved with the Washington Color School, which was known for abstract color field painting. And as part of the movement, Mary shared studio space with some of the other leading artists, including Kenneth Noland, and this is someone that she actually developed a romantic relationship with. Under his influence, Mary learned new art techniques, and her style evolved to include shaped canvases. In late 1963, she held a solo exhibition at the Jefferson Place Gallery in Washington, D.C., which received critical acclaim for its luminous use of color.
Sometimes we cover people, and I think my biography would be
so boring.
A half a sentence. And even then, edits would need to be made to make me sound better.
Right. Like we have to pump this up a little bit somehow.
Yeah, yeah. But in December of 1961, Mary's life took a turn when she found herself entwined in a sexual affair with the most influential person that she knew, President John F. Kennedy. The affair had been reported as one of the most significant relationships of JFK's life. It went on from 1961 until his assassination in 1963. According to White House logs, Mary signed in to see the president 15 different times between October 1961 and August of 63, and these were always on occasions when Jackie Kennedy was away. However, the logs really don't tell the entire story. According to JFK's special assistant, the fact that Mary's name was entered in the log so often means that she wasn't hidden and that she was probably there much more than that. Another White House insider said that Mary was almost a part of the furniture. But this affair was about more than just sex. Mary was a companion to JFK. He confided in her and he enjoyed her intellect. Mary was said to have encouraged JFK to consider some more progressive policies, such as nuclear disarmament and other peace initiatives. Some believe that Mary may have introduced the president to marijuana and possibly LSD as part of her effort to explain her interest in expanding consciousness. But those who were close to JFK said that his relationship with Mary was quite serious. He was very smitten with her. In October of 1963, he admitted that he was deeply in love with her and envisioned a future with her after he left the White House and, of course, his wife Jackie. That month, which was a month before he was assassinated, he wrote Mary a letter urging her to come visit him in Boston or on the Cape. The letter read, quote, "Why don't you leave suburbia for once? Come and see me, either here or at the Cape next week or in Boston the 19th. I know it's unwise, irrational, and that you may hate it. On the other hand, you may not, and I will love it. You say that it's good for me not to get what I want. After all these years, you should give me a more loving answer than that. Why don't you just say yes?" End quote. The letter is signed J, and it was never sent, but it did go up for auction back in 2016, and it sold for nearly $89,000.
Who bought it? I want to know who bought it. I need to go look into that.
But also, oddly, I don't think that's as much money as I expected that to go.
Yeah?
Because that's like a very personal letter.
Yes.
Not that I think it should have gone for more, but I'm just surprised. When JFK was killed on November 22nd, 1963, Mary was deeply affected, and she was convinced that the CIA was involved, to the point that she started asking questions around Washington about what she believed to be a cover-up. Mary believed that Kennedy was killed because he had been moving forward with peace initiatives with the Soviet Union, which threatened powerful interests within the military-industrial complex and intelligence community. Mary and those who shared in her mission wanted to use drugs for peace, but she believed that powerful people in Washington wanted to use drugs for nefarious purposes like brainwashing and espionage. She was very concerned and truly believed that JFK was targeted because they weren't able to control him anymore.
On October 12th, 1964, Mary had been painting in her studio when she decided to take her daily walk on the towpath at around noon. Somewhere along the path, Mary was attacked, and she screamed for help before being shot in the head and then once in the shoulder. She was killed just 2 days before her 44th birthday and almost a year after JFK was assassinated. An employee from a nearby gas station, Henry Wiggins, heard the commotion coming from the area of the canal, but at first he thought it was just some kids playing or maybe even some drunk people fighting. But then he heard a woman scream, "Help me," followed by a gunshot. So Henry took off towards the area that the gunshot came from, and that's when he heard a second shot. When he looked over the retention wall, he saw a man standing over a woman who was lying motionless on the ground. The man looked over at Henry, then stuffed something into his pocket and calmly walked away. Henry went back to the gas station to dial 911, and the police arrived shortly thereafter. In his statement to police, Henry said the man he saw was a black man with a medium build between 5'8" and 5'10" and weighing about 185 pounds. He had on a tan jacket, dark slacks, and a golf cap. This description was released, and authorities immediately began searching for the suspect. After about 45 minutes and half a mile of walking, Detective John Warner found a black man walking across the railroad tracks that ran parallel to this towpath. The man was soaking wet and appeared to have a cut on his hand. It was learned that this man was Ray Crump Jr., a 25-year-old day laborer who was married with 5 kids at home. Ray was a high school dropout and was literally described by his own mother as being the runt of the litter, which is honestly heartbreaking for a mom to say about one of her children. But at some point in life, Ray had suffered a head injury during a robbery, and he was known to have issues with alcohol abuse. He had documented offenses of intoxication and petty theft, and his coworkers said that he often seemed like he just wasn't all there.
It goes without saying that Ray Crump Jr. lived a vastly different life than Mary, in a vastly different part of town that was plagued with poverty and crime. Ray had been working at the Brown construction building site at Southeast Hospital. This was really the best-paying job that an unskilled worker such as Ray could get, but it was strenuous and involved heavy lifting and moving of heavy bags of cement and wheelbarrows. And for Ray, who was actually just 5'3" and 130 pounds, this was really tough work. He had told his coworkers he didn't think he could keep up with the demands of the job. When police first spoke to Ray, his statements were inconsistent, and he claimed that he had been fishing when he dropped his pole in the water and had to get in to retrieve it. Then he said he'd been drinking beer and went to sleep and fell in the water. Although Ray didn't fit the description given by Henry Wiggins, Ray was about 5 to 7 inches too short and about 50 pounds lighter. He was still placed under arrest. Detective Bernie Crook was instructed to take Ray to the homicide unit and book him for murder. Interestingly, just a few months earlier, the Supreme Court had ruled that suspects had a right to have an attorney present during questioning, but Ray was not informed of his right, and the Miranda law that would have required the officer to advise him of his rights would not be decided until 2 years later. After he was questioned, Ray was put in a lineup that was viewed by the only eyewitness at the time, which was Henry Wiggins. Henry later said that he was told to go right up to Ray Crump and say, "This is the guy, that's him," but also said that it wasn't really hard to pick him out anyway. Wiggins said that the lineup wasn't that close as far as the other guys looking like Ray, so he really stood out. At first, police didn't know who the murdered woman was because Mary wasn't carrying a purse or any ID. An autopsy showed that she had been shot with a .38 caliber pistol, with the first bullet entering the left temple about 1.5 inches from her left ear. The wound was surrounded by a dark halo of powder burns, indicating the gun was fired at close range. The second bullet entered over her right shoulder blade and traveled downward through her chest cavity. It pierced her right lung and aorta and was also fired at close range. Both of these gunshots were considered fatal, and the precision left the medical examiner to believe that the killer might have been highly trained in the use of firearms. It was also determined that Mary had been dragged to a more secluded spot, and scuffs on the ground, along with Mary's pants being ripped at the knee, suggested that a struggle had occurred. Mary had not been robbed or sexually assaulted. She was simply executed.
4 days later, the FBI Crime Lab delivered its forensic report to the chief of the Metropolitan Police Department. That report stated there was no forensic evidence at all that would connect Ray Crump Jr. to Mary Meyer or to the murder scene. This meant there was no blood, no hair, semen, saliva, urine, or even fibers from Ray found on Mary, and none from Mary found on him. There was also no evidence that Ray had even fired a gun that day. Considering the amount of blood that was found at the scene and on Mary's body, it seemed highly unlikely that Ray would have managed to avoid getting even a single drop of blood on his skin or his clothing. Furthermore, Ray was much shorter than Mary and not much heavier, so it would have been difficult for him to drag her across the towpath during an intense struggle. The police had no real evidence against Ray Crump other than him being nearby the scene of the crime. They visited his home and spoke with his wife, who said that he had actually skipped work that morning, and she said that she wasn't sure exactly where he was, but she knew that he did not go out fishing. All Ray's fishing gear was in the closet, and a neighbor also said they saw him leave his house around 8 o'clock that morning, but did not see him carrying any fishing gear, though he did look like he was carrying something else. That neighbor clarified, though, that she didn't think what he was carrying was a gun and said she had never seen him with a gun or even known him to have one. There was a huge effort to locate the murder weapon that involved 40 police officers, members of the U.S. Park Police, and 8 Navy scuba divers. They probed the river with grappling hooks and dragged the bottom with magnets in an area near the site of Ray's capture, and they swept around the forest and in the woods. But after 2 days of intense searching, they still never found any weapon. The gun that was used to kill Mary Meyer has never been found to this day. At some time after 6 p.m. on the evening of the murder, Mary's brother-in-law, Ben Bradley, positively identified her body. And we have so much more to get into after one last break to hear a word from this week's sponsors. Even though it is starting to warm up, we've got a long ways to go before we're all ready to be outside. So with our cats hanging out indoors, the last thing I want is a stinky litter box. And that's why I switched to Pretty Litter. It traps odors so well that I barely even notice it's there. It's ultra-absorbent, lightweight, and 1 6-pound bag lasts a whole month. What really gives me peace of mind, though, is how Pretty Litter changes color. It can alert me to potential health issues in my cats, like urinary tract infections or kidney problems, so I can catch things early. Before Pretty Litter, I was dealing with heavy, dusty bags that didn't really do much for odor, and now I have cat litter delivered right to my door, and I'm never running low.
Pretty Litter's non-clumping formula traps odor and moisture, keeping your house smelling fresh. It's lightweight, low dust, and super absorbent with 1 6-pound bag lasting up to a month. Plus, it changes color to indicate potential health issues like urinary tract infections or kidney problems.
Indoor cats and indoor humans agree. Pretty Litter helps my house smell fresh and clean. Go to prettylitter.com/moms to save 20% on your first order and get a free cat toy. That's prettylitter.com/moms to save 20% on your first order and get a free cat toy. prettylitter.com/moms. Terms and conditions apply. See site for details.
Who doesn't love the good things in life? Even though I enjoy a little luxury, I don't always want to break the bank. And I don't have to, thanks to Quince. I recently bought my mother-in-law a gorgeous 100% Mongolian cashmere sweater from Quince. I bought it for Christmas, but it's also perfect for a Mother's Day gift. Honestly, I was so impressed with the quality, I wanted to just keep it for myself, but she's like 5'1", so that would never happen. But Quince's prices were so good, I ordered one just for me. It's comfortable and beautiful and absolutely elevates my wardrobe without without emptying my wallet. What I love about Quince is that they offer luxury essentials at prices that actually make sense. This sweater feels just as luxurious as others I've seen from top brands, but way more affordable. And it's not just cashmere. Their washable silk tops, organic cotton sweaters, and even 14-karat gold jewelry are all priced so well. And the best part is Quince cuts out the middleman by partnering directly with top factories, which means they pass those savings on to us. Plus, they only work with factories that prioritize safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices, so I feel good about every purchase.
Quince offers high-quality luxury essentials at prices you can afford, like 100% Mongolian cashmere sweaters starting at $50, washable silk tops, organic cotton sweaters, and 14-karat gold jewelry, all priced 50 to 80% less than similar luxury brands without compromising quality. Give yourself the luxury you deserve with Quince. Go to quince.com/moms for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/moms to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/moms.
We all have those days when we're running around and the last thing we really want to worry about is body odor. And what's my absolute must for staying fresh all day? Lumi deodorant.
Lumi has changed the game. Since I started using it, I felt way more confident knowing that I'm covered all day. And the best part is that it works everywhere. I'm not just talking about my pits. You can use it on your underboobs, belly button, thighs, feet, you name it. Lumi keeps me smelling fresh no matter where I need it.
My new favorite is the solid stick with clean tangerine. It's the perfect balance of fresh, but it's still subtle. Plus, it glides on smoothly and doesn't leave any of that weird residue behind. I've made Lumi a part of my daily routine, and it's one of the easiest ways to make sure I feel fresh all day long.
What makes Lumi unique, you ask? It's a whole body deodorant that's clinically proven to block odor for up to 72 hours. Whether it's your armpits, your feet, or anywhere else, Lumi's got you covered. It's pH balanced and gentle enough for use below the waist, and it's free from baking soda and parabens. It's a deodorant you can trust to keep you fresh from head to toe.
Lumi's starter pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice like mini body wash and deodorant wipes, and free shipping. As a special offer for listeners, new customers get 15% off all Lumi products with our exclusive code. And if you combine the 15% off with the already discounted starter pack, that equals over 40% off their starter pack. Use code MOMS for 15% off your first purchase at LumiDeodorant.com. That's code MOMS at LumiDeodorant.com. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Smell fresher, stay drier, and boost your confidence from head to toe with Lumi. And now back to the episode. So before the break, we were discussing the FBI's interest in Ray Crump Jr., trying to link him to Mary Meyer's murder. And despite there not being any physical evidence, they haven't found the weapon. The investigation lacked really substantial evidence that was against him. But investigators finally got a break in the case the morning after the murder when a U.S. Army lieutenant named William Mitchell showed up at police headquarters and said that he saw the news of Mary's murder in the paper that morning, and he believed that he had passed her while running on the towpath the day before. He said he was stationed at the Pentagon and ran on the towpath most days during lunchtime. William was able to describe Mary's clothing in great detail and said that she was crossing a narrow wooden footbridge when he stopped to allow her to cross before him. About 200 yards later, William passed a black man wearing clothing almost identical to the description that Henry Wiggins gave of the man he saw at the murder scene. Despite having no evidence against Ray Crump Jr., the government seemed eager to get his murder trial underway, and he was indicted on October 19th, just 1 week after the crime and without a preliminary hearing, and he was arraigned on October 30th. His trial date was set for January 11th, 1965. The murder of a prominent socialite in a racially charged atmosphere was a huge story in the media, and there was a public outcry for justice to be served swiftly. David Atchison, who was a family friend of the Meyers and the lead of the U.S. Attorney's Office, prioritized this case and assigned an experienced prosecutor to it. The judge also ruled that Mary's life would not be allowed to be paraded in the courtroom, basically meaning no jabs about her affair with JFK. But in a turn of events, Ray's trial was postponed until July of 1965 because his new lawyer, Devi Johnson Roundtree, was able to obtain a postponement to conduct her own investigation. And this attorney wasn't just any attorney. In 1942, Devi Roundtree became the first Black woman and one of the first women, period, to break racial and gender barriers in the U.S. military when she joined the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps during World War II. She went on to become one of the first women to be commissioned an Army officer. She earned the rank of captain and personally recruited dozens of Black women for wartime Army service. After the war, Devi went to Howard Law School and she graduated in 1950. At that time, there were only 83 Black women lawyers in the U.S. compared to over 6,000 white women. After law school, Devi established a law firm in Northwest Washington, D.C. In 1995, she was co-counsel in a landmark civil rights case that challenged racial segregation in interstate bus travel. The case involved a 22-year-old private in the Women's Army Corps who refused to give her seat up to a white passenger on an interstate bus traveling from New Jersey to North Carolina. She was arrested for disorderly conduct, and she and her family pursued legal action. After 3 years of legal battles, the Interstate Commerce Commission ruled that segregation on interstate buses violated the Interstate Commerce Act. This was a significant milestone in dismantling segregation in public transportation and laid the groundwork for future civil rights actions, though this ruling is often overshadowed by later events such as Rosa Parks' defiance and the Montgomery bus boycott.
The first time Devi Roundtree met Ray Crump Jr., she knew that he was an innocent man. When she started looking into the case, she discovered that the government had no physical evidence against him whatsoever. There was no murder weapon, no hair, no blood, no fiber, no anything to show that Ray had any contact with Mary or the crime scene. And there was also no evidence that he fired a gun. The police had arrested Ray based only on the fact that he was in the area and because Henry Wiggins claimed to have seen specifically a Black man standing over Mary's body. When Devi looked into the police file, she found that the man that had even been described by Henry Wiggins and by William Mitchell was 5 inches taller than Ray and outweighed him by 50 pounds. The two witnesses almost certainly described the same person, but that person was not Ray Crump Jr. The trial commenced on July 19, 1965, at the United States District Court for the District of Columbia in Washington, D.C. Since the crime occurred in the nation's capital, the trial was held in federal court. The jury was made up of 8 Black jurors and 4 white jurors, and 7 out of 12 were women. Prosecutors presented a circumstantial case in their attempt to prove that Ray shot Mary Meyer. Their case included 27 witnesses and over 50 exhibits. The lead prosecutor went so far as to try introducing a large tree branch into court as evidence and claimed that the location of the bloodstains on this branch would support his reconstruction of Mary's struggle before her death. He argued that Ray attacked Mary with the intent to rape her, and when he failed, he shot her twice with a pistol. Henry Wiggins testified that he heard screams and saw a Black man standing over Mary shortly after the shots were fired. He testified that the man he saw was about 5'8" and weighed about 185 pounds. Lieutenant William Mitchell testified that he saw a man matching Ray's description following Mary shortly before her death. They also presented evidence that they found Ray near the crime scene shortly after the murder and that he was wet and disheveled and claimed to have been fishing despite having no fishing gear with him. When it was the defense's turn, Devi Roundtree presented 3 witnesses and 1 single exhibit to the jury. First, she emphasized the lack of physical evidence and pointed out how weak the prosecution's case really was. She also challenged the witness descriptions of the alleged attacker. Then, Ray himself was presented as Exhibit A. He stood before the jury, and Devi asked them if Ray, who was 5'3" and 130 pounds, matched the description of the person described by the 2 witnesses. It's actually unclear whether the prosecution was even aware of the size discrepancy between Ray and the alleged suspect. They never even addressed this themselves in the trial or offered any explanation for why Ray was such a different size than the man the witnesses described. On July 30th, 1965, after 11 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict. Ray Crump Jr., was found not guilty of the murder of Mary Meyer. Her murder still remains unsolved to this day, but boy, oh boy, are there theories.
Yes, there are. There are some people, though, who believe that Ray was the actual perpetrator. Journalist Nina Burley said that Ray lied about what he was doing on the towpath that day, claiming to have been fishing but not being able to prove it, and that the evidence against him may have been circumstantial, but that it was strong. She said that her investigation led her to conclude that Ray was capable of violent behavior. Nina had met Ray's former wife, who was apparently in hiding from him, and she described Ray's violent side and showed Nina a scar on her neck from a knife attack. Ray did serve time in prison after his acquittal for repeat arsons and sexual assault. Another theory is that Mary's death was simply a random act of violence that was unrelated to her political connections or personal life, and that her connections in Washington were just a tragic coincidence. And sure, that happens, but how much do we emphasize when that happens? Like, this is so rare that someone just randomly, kills somebody for no reason. It's very, very,
Very
rare.
rare, yeah.
A popular theory, though, is that Mary was killed by the CIA or some other government power. Those who believe this theory say that Mary's connection to the CIA, the FBI, and numerous prominent figures in government and politics cannot be overlooked. Furthermore, supporters of this theory point to another mystery. This one I'm fascinated by, and this is the mystery of Mary's personal diary. So according to Ben Bradley, who again was Mary's brother-in-law, he and his wife Toni, who was Mary's sister, learned about Mary's diary from Anne Truitt, who was a friend of Mary's who actually called them from Japan on the night of the murder. And she urged them to find and secure Mary's diary right away. So when Bradley and Toni went to Mary's studio to look for the diary, they found James Angleton, the CIA's head of counterintelligence and a family friend, attempting to break in and also was looking for her diary.
Whoa.
When the diary was found, Bradley claimed that he and Toni decided to burn it after reading its contents, which included details about Mary's relationship with Kennedy. But there are many conflicting accounts about the diary. For example, the New York Times reported in 1974 that before Mary died, she confided in her friends James and Anne Truitt about her affair with Kennedy and also about her diary, which of course outlined details about some of her evenings with the president. Mary asked them to, in the event of her death, keep the diary and to show it to her son Quentin when he turned 21. And so on the night that Mary was murdered, the Truitts were in Tokyo. And so that's when they contacted James Angleton to go find the diary.
So it sounds like they may have just tried to get anyone over there to go find the diary. And that, I guess, they contacted the people that they trusted to get that done. Really interesting. So according to this account from the New York Times, Mary's sister Toni and her husband Ben, as well as James Angleton and his wife Cicely, along with Mary's husband Cord and her former roommate Anne Chamberlain, all apparently gathered at Mary's on the Saturday after her death and tore the place apart looking for the diary. But after searching for hours, they came up empty-handed. Toni later ended up finding the diary in Mary's studio, and it was locked in a steel box filled with hundreds of letters. Naturally, the fact that this diary has vanished has led to even more speculation about Mary's death. Multiple sources claim the diary contained details about the 2-year affair Mary had with JFK, including their intimate relationship and private discussions. It also reflected Mary's thoughts about JFK's evolving political views, namely his push for peace initiatives, nuclear disarmament, and his alleged conflict with the CIA. Some believe the diary may have had insight into JFK's assassination, as Mary was known to be very open about her suspicions that the CIA was involved in his death. And supporters of this theory believe that this is why Cord Meyer and James Angleton were so determined to find the diary. So this author, Peter Janney, he wrote Mary's Mosaic, also claims that his father, a man named Wister Janney, this was a senior CIA official, was part of some conspiracy to silence Mary Meyer. And he argues that her murder was orchestrated to prevent her from going public with information about Kennedy's assassination and about government corruption. Mary's murder, he says, had all the characteristics of a highly professional hit job as well as the framing of an innocent man. The diary may have also had details about Mary's experimentation with LSD and her efforts to introduce consciousness-expanding ideas to powerful figures in Washington, including the president. And
Wild.
and basically, her connection with this guy, Timothy Leary, who was doing all this research at the time on psychedelics, kind of adds weight to this theory that Mary was involved in these types of things. So even though Tony and James claim to have destroyed the diary, there are people who believe that there are still portions of it out there or copies of it out there somewhere. Neither the prosecution nor the defense in Ray Crump's trial had any idea about the diary until long after the trial was over. But once it came to light that this diary had once existed, it was realized that Ben Bradley actually lied on the stand because he was asked specifically what articles of Mary's property he had found, and Bradley never mentioned finding this diary. The prosecutor later said that he had been totally unaware of Mary's connections, and if he even knew about the diary, it would have changed everything. When Dovey Roundtree learned about this diary years later, she actually found out about it through Bradley's autobiography. She said she was completely shocked, and it would have changed everything. Her line of questioning would have been much different if she were aware of the story that Bradley had told in his autobiography 30 years later. Dovey said she was deeply unsettled when she learned about James Angleton's awareness of the diary's existence and his interest in finding it, reading it, and destroying it. And if she had known about all this back then, she would have pursued, answers as to what was going on. Interestingly, aside from the people involved or those who were close to them, nobody really knew about the diary or about Mary's affair with President Kennedy until 1976, when the National Enquirer published an article about it. One person said it was a bombshell, not because it happened, but because nobody I know ever heard a whisper.
Wow.
In a deathbed interview in February of 2001, Mary's husband, Cord Meyer, was asked who he believed had murdered his ex-wife. And contradicting an earlier statement he had made that pointed to a sexually motivated assault by a single individual, on his deathbed, Cord responded to that question that he thought the same SOBs that killed John F. Kennedy killed his wife.
Mic drop.
Yeah. So I don't know what that means.
Yeah, this is super fascinating because, well, actually, I'm actually very surprised that Ray Crump Jr. wasn't found guilty.
Me too.
Because it just seems like if there's this much government involvement behind it,
and especially at the time, because they really had nothing on him. Like, legitimately, they didn't have anything. I don't think he was out fishing. His wife seems to think he wasn't out fishing. No one knows what he was really doing, but I don't think that he was killing anyone.
To me, it sounds more likely somebody that has a problem with alcohol, should be at work, isn't at work. He says, I'm out fishing. Basically, don't tell my wife. That sort of a thing. So, yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying there. But also, I find it so interesting how far off he was from the description. If you're 1 or 2 inches off or 10 pounds off, that's one thing. But 50 pounds and 5 inches, it's a totally different person. It's very hard to get that.
And they didn't have
off.
any, I didn't see any information in the research about what Ray was wearing when they picked him up, but they had the description of the suspect wearing a tan-colored coat, a cap, and everything.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming that Ray was not wearing clothes that matched that description because there was nothing about that in there, which would make sense that they wouldn't document things if it wasn't lining up necessarily with what was, being reported or what, the witnesses were saying. So, but I thought that was interesting too, that they did have a description of what clothing the suspect was wearing, but then there was no mention of whether or not Ray was actually dressed like that.
Yeah. And then of course the diary of it all about, them being so quick to say you got to get it. Obviously, there was something in there she didn't want people to know.
Right. Which I feel like if you had an affair with the president of the United States, anything in your diary you would not want to become public knowledge. So you can understand that. But also at the same time, you understand why people have questions about what exactly was in there. Because people obviously have questions about JFK's assassination. So it makes sense naturally that they would be like, well, I wish I could see what was in that lady's diary.
Right. Yeah. That is a very fascinating story. And yeah, even if her ex-husband's going to his grave saying,
right,
I know who did it, and it's that guy
Right.
who was killed, who happened to be the president.
Yeah.
Those people.
Very, very interesting
Crazy
story for sure. And I feel like there is still more that I want to look into, like from this story. And now I want to go and like there's specific details I'm like curious about. I'm like, I want to go find out more about that. So yeah, fascinating story. I loved this one.
Absolutely. Yeah, this was super interesting. Before we go, just a reminder, we have bonus episodes up on Patreon and Apple Podcasts Plus, I think it's called. Bonus episodes up there if you want more interactive and extra stuff there at patreon.com/momsandmysteries podcast. Otherwise, on the Apple Podcast app, you can find lots of our extra stuff. We have more stuff coming up very, very soon.
All right, guys. Thank you for listening this week. We will be back next week. Same time, same place, new story.
Have a great week.
Bye.